Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
We're honored to have Cynthia Gibson, the head of the Georgia Legal Services offices in Dalton, Georgia, which is in northwest Georgia, and she'll talk over about services that her group or similar groups offer throughout the United States. Good morning, Cynthia.
Good morning.
We appreciate you coming on, and I think before we really start going into your issues, I think we should address some issues here on the fraud situations coming up on the coronavirus frauds. It's another scams that are taking place, and I'm just going to go over those real quick. We've got a public service announcement from the Federal Bureau of Investigation that advised on March 20th that they see a rise in fraud schemes related to the coronavirus, and some of them are fake CDC emails, and they advise watch out for emails claiming to be from Centers for Disease Control and Prevention or other organizations claiming to offer information on the virus. And they're advising do not click links or open attachments you don't recognize. That fraudsters can use the links and emails to deliver malware to your computer and to steal personal information. Beware of websites and apps claiming to track coronavirus cases worldwide. Criminals are using malicious websites to infect and lock devices until payment is received. Something good to remember. And the next issue they talk about is the phishing, P-H-I-S-I-N-G emails. Look out for emails asking you to verify your personal information in order to receive economic stimulus checks from the government. While talks of the economic stimulus checks have been in the news cycle, government agencies are not sending unsolicited emails seeking your private information. And some of these phishing emails, where they're just trying to get information, might be related to a charitable contribution, general financial relief, airline carrier refunds, fake cures and vaccines, and a fake testing kit. And the last one that they advise is that the counterfeit treatment or equipment. Be cautious of anyone selling products that claim to prevent, treat, diagnose, or cure the coronavirus. Be alert 19. Be alert to counterfeit products such as sanitizing products and personal protective equipment, including N95 respirator masks, goggles, full face shields, protective gowns, and gloves. More information on unapproved or counterfeit PPE, those are again personal protective equipment, can be found at the cdc.gov. You also can find information on the U.S. Food and Drug Administration website, FDA.gov, and the Environmental Protection Agency website, EPA.gov. Those are all www. And they're advising to report counterfeit products to www.ic3.gov. This is the center that gets all information about fraudulent activities. I think that we realize that this is a nationwide, worldwide problem. I'm just looking at a notice from the City of London Police where they also say watch out for scam messages. Don't click on links or attachments in suspicious emails, and never respond to unsolicited messages and calls that ask you for your personal financial details. And they advise here, if you're going to shop online, if you're making a purchase from a company or person you don't know and trust, carry out some research first. That's just common, everyday common sense. Ask a friend or family member for advice before completing the purchase. If you decide to go ahead with the purchase, use a credit card if you have one, as most credit card providers insure online purchases. So those are some good advice. And the other point, they say always protect your devices from the latest threats. Always install the latest software and apps to protect your device from the latest threats. But that's out of the London Police, London, England. And then the United States Postal Service came out on March 17th and said that we all should be aware nationwide of various information and scams that follow this coronavirus related issues. And the postal inspectors say, protect yourself from the scams. 1, be aware of charity scams. Only contribute to established organizations. 2, don't click on links in emails. And this is just general advice that we tell everybody. Never click on links in emails from sources you don't know, especially those that claim to be from CDC or the World Health Organization. There currently is, there are a lot of talks about it, but there is no cure for treatment. So beware of offers for vaccines, pills, potions, lotions, or other products that claim to be a cure or treat coronavirus. And never give out financial information. Don't give your financial information or personal information to anyone you don't know and don't trust. Resist pressure tactics. Don't be pressured into making immediate financial decisions. And again, know who you can trust. Consult with a trusted friend, family member, or call a professional. Call your local sheriff, your local police, if it really bothers you. But those are some advice, and if you've been watching TV here in the United States, you'll see this being talked about on the news programs and actually public service announcements. So, having said that, Cynthia, we got that information out to our listeners. So, again, I want to say welcome, and if you can, just for our listeners, that Cynthia is a graduate of Emory University School of Law and is an Atlanta Law Fellow scholar, and that she heads up the Georgia Legal Services Office in Dalton. So if you could give us an idea about your organization and then your duties and similar type groups that you're aware of throughout the country.
Sure. So I work for Georgia Legal Services, and we are a statewide legal services program. We cover all of Georgia except the 5 metro Atlanta counties, and we have 10 offices around the state. The office that I manage is in Dalton, as you said. And basically what we do is we provide free legal services to the people that live in our service area and who qualify for our services. For the most part, what that means is your income is below 200% of the federal poverty level, and you have a legal issue that is something we handle. We only do civil law, and sometimes people don't understand the difference between civil and criminal. But basically, if you get arrested, you get a ticket, or you could go to jail, that's criminal law. And we don't handle any of that. Everything else is civil. We also have an Older Americans Act that provides the Elder Legal Assistance Program, is what it's called in Georgia. But every state has this grant to provide legal assistance to elders. And so for that specific grant, there is no income limit. So we don't, if you're over 200, we might still be able to help you. It just depends upon your legal issue and whether it's something that we would be better suited to help you with, or whether someone in the private bar would be better suited to do that type of work.
Right.
There are either legal services exist in every state and territory of the U.S. They're either called legal services or legal aid. So if you do a Google search for that in your area, you will find who your local program is.
Let's, as you know, this is kind of geared to our senior citizens out there. What age are you looking at seniors here in Georgia? I know it varies in different areas, but
It does vary. For our program, it's the age of 60 and up is how we define a senior.
Right. And again, talking to our listeners, we're talking about a service that you can call and usually or most of the time it's a free service or certainly the initial calls, right? So if somebody...
Everything we do is free. No charge.
Okay.
Ever.
So and they're not criminal cases, which is fine, but when people have concerns about different issues that might be of a civil nature, that their idea is to call, and if it bothers them, to give you all a call and see what your guidance is, because you supply guidance. And do you also take cases to court?
We do. We provide advice. Sometimes, as you said, clients just want to get an opinion and get advice on what they should do. Other times people have an action they've been sued in court, or they have something that's going to require court action to fix their legal matter, and we do both of those.
Right. You talked about that it might be better in the public, in the private sector. How does that work? I mean, do you have like people that will come and do things pro bono, or do the seniors then have to pay for this services, or is it both?
It's both. We do have some areas that we do have attorneys that will do pro bono cases, and other cases, the senior, what they're learning is either something that we don't do. Maybe they've got a personal injury type case, a wrongful death, a car accident, something like that is handled by the private bar, usually on a contingency fee basis.
Right.
And so those just aren't things we do. And then there's other types of cases, maybe they need a bankruptcy. Right. And we refer those out, and oftentimes those are referred out pro bono. But a lot of that just depends on whether the senior has the ability to retain private counsel or not.
Right. Just if you let the listeners know, I believe that you had you spent some years in the private sector, so you understand both the public and private sector. Is that correct?
No, I have never been in the private sector.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I misread that. I saw something about that. So, but you deal with private attorneys, and yeah, right. Okay, and that's. I guess that's what I mean. Your dealings have been that you interact in a community, and each community is different. I understand throughout the country here. Now, you talk about in the way of advice. Is this advice can people come in and meet with you and your staff, or can they do it over the phone, or what is your protocol on the contacts by the seniors?
Mostly for an advice type matter, it's going to be over the phone because like my office covers 12 counties, so we're geographically distant from a lot of the clients that we serve. If the client wants to meet with us, we do go to senior centers and we can meet with clients there. But most of the advice is going to be over the phone, and the clients that we meet with in person are going to be those that we're providing more extended representation to.
Okay. Well, we're going to take our first break here from the Safe Senior Hour, and then we'll be back with attorney Cynthia Gibson right after this break.
The disease of addiction is a life-altering challenge, not just for the person suffering its effects, but also for the family and friends who support and love the one caught in its grasp. What should be the course of treatment? Who is the best person to render treatment? And what is the best place to go for the care that is needed? We know that you want answers to these and many more questions. Call 770-696-9862 and speak to a representative of the Atlanta Healing Center. They can tailor a program specifically designed to address the needs of the person suffering with an addiction, or give you guidance as to where that help may be found. Information is the key, and the trained staff at AHC is here to assist. If you wish, you can also get more information on the website located at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
Want to give your family or loved one the perfect gift? Then go online and check out the TornadoBodyDryer.com. I love mine and the warm heat air massage it gives me after my shower. The Tornado Body Dryer is super. You'll love it, and you'll love having one in your shower.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Well, welcome back to the second segment of the Safe Senior Hour. We're honored today to have our guest, Cynthia Gibson, from the Georgia, I want to get this right, from the Georgia Legal Services Office in Northwest Georgia up in Dalton. And again, we want to thank her for coming on. We were in the middle of the conversation about how in your specific instance, and again, I want to remind everybody, there are similar type organizations, correct, Cynthia, throughout the United States?
Yes, there are.
And the way to do it, we were talking about what's the normal way, just because you do a lot in rural Georgia. People got to remember Georgia's kind of, there's some rural areas. It's not everything is not Atlanta or metro Atlanta in Georgia. So you get outside of Georgia, there are rural areas, which is not unusual for an area covered by your organization or your sister organizations throughout the country. So the first call or first contact would probably be by telephone. Is that correct?
Yes, it is by telephone, and we complete an intake and get the basic information, and then the case is assigned to an attorney who will call the person back.
So how many other attorneys are on your staff?
On my staff, I have 2 other attorneys right now, and we have 2 open positions. That's just in Dalton.
Wow.
Georgia Legal Services has about 70 attorneys.
Wow. So you will get, somebody will take your information and you'll get to a proper official or attorney to address whatever your topic is. And I know topics are different. And I know one of the areas that we're really concerned with about seniors is their financial exploitation here. Can you go over some of the maybe type of cases that you've heard about? I mean, obviously we can't get into specifics about individuals, but just let our listeners understand the type of calls that are coming in about specific type cases.
Sure. I mean, there's all different ways that financial exploitation of seniors occurs. Oftentimes it is with someone who has power of attorney that the senior has granted to that person, and the power of attorney then thinks that gives them free rein to do whatever they want with the senior's resources, and that's not what the law says, and that is not in fact true. Some of the saddest cases are seniors that end up needing nursing home care, and family members usually convince the senior that they'll take care of them. If they just sign their property over to them, they will take them out of the nursing home, move in with them, and they'll provide all the care that they need. And so, you know, myself included, no one wants to be in a nursing home. So a lot of times people do this thinking, well, it's all right. I want my house to go to my child or grandchild anyway, so I'll do that. That seems like a good idea. Only, 2 or 3 months, maybe 6 months down the road, the child is tired of providing the care, has found out it's harder than they thought, and they decide that they'll just evict their parent or grandparent because they own the house now and they can just kick them out. And those are some really, really bad cases that we see.
And I think it's a good time to remind our listeners, when we talk about abuse, and again, the North Georgia Elder Abuse Task Force, which I'm the law enforcement coordinator of, we look at 3 areas: physical, institutional, and financial. Financial being the biggest. But the biggest crime or the biggest perpetrators of issues dealing with financial are unfortunately relatives or loved ones. And one of the biggest vehicles, as Cynthia just talked about, is the power of attorney. And I think that what you just talked about is not uncommon. I mean, those cases happen like that, I'm sure, throughout the country. I've got to ask you, and it's a big, as we speak to seniors around, well, certainly North Georgia, what I think they're surprised at is how easy it is to get into a power of attorney and how easy it is to get out. Could you tell our listeners that, please?
Sure. I mean, the power of attorney is just a paper document. You don't even need an attorney to do it.
Right.
You can go online and find the form and print it out, fill it out, have it witnessed and notarized, and there you go. You got a power of attorney. There's nothing wrong with them. They're good documents to have. You just have to make sure that they're used appropriately.
Right.
And to get rid of a power of attorney, if you decide I don't want this person to be my agent anymore, under the law, all you have to do is tear it up and inform anyone that was aware of the power of attorney that you have revoked it. So if your bank knew about it or other places that your agent had used it, you have to let them know that it's not any good anymore.
Let me ask you.
Really,
Excuse me, I'm sorry. If I can, just for clarification, to enter in a power of attorney, I understand there's a form. How specific can you be? Can you have a power of attorney just for specific transactions or specific types of activity?
you can. Those aren't what we generally do, and it's really not what a senior uses.
Okay.
So for the purpose of the power of attorney, and it's actually a good thing, is to avoid the need for a guardianship later. If the senior develops some type of dementia or some other type of memory issues or problems, and they're no longer able to handle their own affairs and they need help, then this power of attorney gives someone else the ability to help them. And you don't need to go down the guardianship route. Because if you don't have that, and the senior becomes unable to handle their own affairs, then your only option is guardianship.
Right, and let me
takes away.
Excuse me, and let me just for our listeners, power of attorney. You heard Cynthia just talk about. You can get your forms, you could fill it out and have it notarized. When you get into a guardianship and a conservatorship, is that the proper term? Isn't that through the courts? Normally a probate court.
Yes, that's a court action.
Okay, so court actions versus individual separate actions. So that's what you're looking at. And I think that's why you're saying for a lot of people, the power of attorney, which is a very good document, and it's a good tool to help manage, issues for seniors, is done, and it's there's no attorney needed. Is that correct?
That is correct. There is no attorney needed to do a power of attorney. Now, we do them all the time. Attorneys do them.
Right.
And I think it's a good idea to have it explained to make sure you understand what you're doing. And even in the standard power of attorney, you can choose what powers you want to give your agent. So you don't have to give them everything. You can choose. But you can also do specialty power of attorney, such as a real estate power of attorney, which gives you the authority just to sell or purchase this particular property. And that's sort of a limited power of attorney.
So, the abuses that you have seen that people should be aware of, one was you talked about real estate, but the other is that we've seen, to see if you agree, is that they get on their parents or grandparents or whatever, their loved one's account, and that's when possible misuse of the funds take place.
Yes, that does happen, and it happened a lot more during the recession we had back in 08 and 09. And when I talk to a senior and about a power of attorney, and they're thinking about doing one and giving it to this loved one, I ask them, is this loved one self-supporting? Do you ever have to loan them money or help them pay their bills? And if you do, then to me that's a red flag. Because what often happens is the loved one's like, I'm short this month. I just need a few hundred. I'm going to put it back. And so they borrow from the senior, planning to put it back, but nothing bad ever happens and no one even notices. So they never put it back. And then it happens again, and then it just sort of becomes a way of life until at some point the senior's no longer able to pay their bills, and that's usually when it comes to life.
That's why if you're thinking of doing it or you want to re-look at the power of attorney you gave to loved ones, and again, my experience, the vast majority of power attorneys are very useful and aren't abused. I don't know whether you agree with that, Cynthia, but that's what we've seen.
I would. The problem is, of course, I only see the bad ones.
Right. Well, so do we in the law enforcement world. Yeah. But as we speak to seniors, they do talk about it. And a good example is a case that we had up in North Georgia where a daughter was the daughter. Now, again, we have to remember, listeners, when we talk about sons and daughters and seniors' kids, we're not talking about kids that are 17, 18 years old. We're talking about their kids and sons and daughters that are in their 40s and 50s and sometimes 60. They're in their 60s. And this daughter got a power of attorney from her mother. Her mother had to start a dementia, and it got worse. And the daughter did just exactly like Cynthia said. She got the power of attorney and then got her name put on the bank account just because the power of attorney allowed her to do that. And she proceeded to siphon money out, started off just like Cynthia said. This woman was going to pay it back. Well, then she ran through all her mother's money, but she had the power of attorney, so she realized she could then deal something with the house, exactly like Cynthia said. And she got a reverse mortgage on it. So there was I think there was over $50,000 deposited into the account of the mother, which the power of attorney daughter had. And she proceeded to use that. And upon being arrested by the local police and sheriff's office or wherever it was, for taking her mother, because payments were going out and nothing was helping the mother really. And it turned out that the daughter was being caught up in a romance scam, and our listeners might have heard that we've talked about romance scams. So she was stealing from her mother to pay somebody where she was involved in a romance scam. So it's like a domino effect. But it was like everything Cynthia said about when you see something on this type of case, it kind of grows. It doesn't start off with people with evil intentions normally. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's true. Most of the time it doesn't start out with a bad intent.
Well, I mean, there's an example, and I think that the use of the power of attorney, which in that example I gave, it was used to get on a bank account, name on a bank account, and then it was used to enter into a real estate agreement on a reverse mortgage. So you can see when we talk about the power of attorney, it is a very powerful document and can be, and that's why I think people have to be concerned. And our advice is as Cynthia just said, it would be good to talk to an attorney or call whoever you deal with at whether it be Georgia Legal Services or the legal aid in your community. With that, we're going to take our second break on the Safe Senior Hour, and we'll be back with attorney Cynthia Gibson for our third segment.
If your health insurance premium is more than your mortgage, Ellen Deal with Ideal Solutions is here to help. Whether you're a small business owner, individual, family, or baby boomer, email maga45cag@gmail.com and I'll respond with 3 easy questions to help you determine if you can get away from Obamacare. As a 20-year veteran of the insurance industry, I'm here to help with all your insurance needs. Email Ellen Deal at maga45cag@gmail.com.
Whether cruising the strip in a 57 Chevy
or taking the family on a vacation in a 71 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, you need to tune in to Classic Cars with Steve Ronaldo and Jim Weber every Saturday from 8 to 9 a.m. on americaswebradio.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mike Karuchak. Have you ever wondered what doctors talk about amongst themselves? If you do, join us on the Doctor's Lounge and hear the doctors' conversations amongst themselves. Join me and my co-host, Dr. Hal Schertz, every Thursday morning, 8 to 9 a.m.
This is Michael Gannett with the Middle East Research Center Limited, bringing you insight to...
The disease of addiction is a life-altering challenge, not just for the person suffering its effects, but also for the family and friends who support and love the one caught in its grasp. What should be the course of treatment? Who is the best person to render treatment? And what is the best place to go for the care that is needed? We know that you want answers to these and many more questions. Call 770-696-9862 and speak to a representative of the Atlanta Healing Center. They can tailor a program specifically designed to address the needs of the person suffering with an addiction, or give you guidance as to where that help may be found. Information is the key, and the trained staff at AHC is here to assist. If you wish, you can also get more information on the website located at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
This is America's Web Radio. Would you like to have a show, talk about your business, or express your opinion on America's Web Radio? Just email gm@americaswebradio.com and we'll get back to you. Thank you.
Welcome back to the third segment of the Safe Senior Hour. And again, we're honored to have Cynthia Gibson, attorney, and where she heads the Georgia Legal Services Office in Northwest Georgia. That's up in Dalton. And we appreciate you coming on, Cynthia. And we were talking about financial exploitation type cases and the power of attorney. And I think everybody will realize that by granting somebody a power of attorney, it's a very powerful document. Do you agree?
Yes, I do agree. And there's other things that people can do. A lot of times I see seniors like put kids on bank accounts, and they do that so that if something happens to them, if they were to pass away, the child would be able to access the money.
Right.
But there's a form you can fill out at the bank that is payable on death, that you name your beneficiary for your bank account. And then that person can still get access to your money, but not until you pass away. And it helps avoid issues with possible fraud or exploitation. It can also help avoid, if your child gets sued, that bank account can get garnished for their debt. So there's other options, which is why it's a good idea to get some advice before you make up your mind how to go.
Right, and that's, you can go to advice, get, through an attorney that or to call, whether it be the Georgia, an organization like the Georgia Legal Services or legal aid services in your community. I think that's important. I do want to go into an area that's been very prevalent in the news now, and that's when we get into institutional cases, and a lot of times it involves abuse. What has been your experience with seniors calling about issues with nursing homes or assisted living homes or things like that?
Most of the issues that come out of institutional facilities are going to be neglect or physical abuse, not so much the financial abuse in those situations. And there's situations where the residents aren't getting the care that they need, and even worse are those who are actually being abused in the home, either by another resident or by staff. And
you see those people call in and look for assistance on matters like that. Is that correct?
Well, the only cases like this that we see are the very minor cases that
Right.
come through the ombudsman, because private attorneys handle the nursing home type litigation cases where they're suing nursing homes for neglect or wrongful death
But
or abuse.
Yep, but a senior could call and get some consultation, and you could kind of direct them where to go. And it could be to the ombudsman program, or it could be, to a private lawyer. But at least they're talking to somebody in your office that understands the issues, and they're not making a rash decision. Is that pretty good advice?
Yes, I mean, we could definitely provide advice. We hear all kinds of complaints, and some of them they're all important, but some of them are more minor as far as physical danger. And those are cases that would be more appropriate to get the ombudsman involved and try to resolve
Right.
whatever the issues are.
Yeah, just for our listeners who might not be aware, can you just give us a brief description of what the ombudsmen do, or what their duties are from your point of view?
Sure. It's the long-term care ombudsman program, and they, as far as I know, I believe they're in every state.
Right.
And what they do is that they are advocates that visit the nursing home. They're advocates for the residents. They don't work for the nursing home, and they visit every long-term care facility in the state, and they're there if there's a complaint or a problem. They help to try to resolve the problem, and if they can't get a resolution, then they will refer it to a legal aid organization or to a private attorney.
And I know, and we've had Melanie McNeil on here, who's the state of Georgia's long-term ombudsman, and I believe she has said that they are in every state. But a lot of these complaints that people, well, let me back up. We advise people, if you have some concern, contact a professional and raise it. You don't want to have this on your conscience that something happened and that you didn't tell somebody what was going on. And so in that case, I'd tell an ombudsman or call a lawyer at the legal services office or legal aid offices in your area, and just talk about it if it bothers you. And I know some complaints can be as trivial as they don't like the food, or the food was not hot, or something like that. I've heard that. But it also can be that, they're not feeding me the food that I thought I would have. They're not giving me my medication. These are the type of complaints that you out there, the listeners, if you hear that you should bring it to some professional and try to get some guidance. What's your thoughts on that, Cynthia?
Oh, I agree, and there's really no wrong door. So you can call us, you can call the ombudsman, because we know each other, and if it's more appropriate for the other, then we'll make the referral for you.
Right.
And get you to where you need to be.
And I think that especially in this day and age that are going on, that it takes a whole lot of people to take care of our seniors. That in terms of, it's not just a person or a group. It's relatives. It's close friends. It's fellow people from their faith-based community. It's anything like that where you see and have a reason to believe there's some issues. And again, once you call the legal services office or legal aid offices, they'll direct you to the right person, or they'll help you what you have to do. And again, right, we want to stress, right, Cynthia, that this is a free service, correct?
Yes, everything is free.
And it's for seniors over 60 is what
Yes.
is what we're talking about today. So that's great. Let me ask you concerning issues in the home dealing with like self-neglect or things like that. When a neighbor goes over to see a friend and they just think the conditions are so horrible, and I've heard stories about it. Do you get any contacts like that, or have you heard stories like that?
I have heard stories like that, and usually the contacts where we get those cases are landlords, if the person's renting,
okay.
and then the landlord's wanting to evict them due to the conditions. What I would recommend if you saw that and you had a friend is to make a report to your local Adult Protective Services program.
Right.
Because those reports are confidential.
True.
You're shielded from liability, so there's no downside to making a report just stating, I'm concerned about this. And then they can have a professional go out there and meet with this senior and maybe get them some services that they need that could help them. Now, the senior could say, I don't want your help, go away, and they have the right to do that.
Right. No, I totally agree, and I think it's but again, you're telling somebody, and that's important. Could you go over this bit about eviction from a residence or eviction from is it nursing homes? I've heard about that. Can you kind of talk that over about what seniors, what their or what anybody's rights are? I guess can you or examples that you've seen like that?
Sure. Well, they're different. So if you're in a nursing home and the nursing home wants to evict you, what it's called in that situation is a discharge.
Okay.
Involuntary discharge. And they have to give you written notice of that.
Oh.
And when they give you the notice, they have to also give the ombudsman notice. And the ombudsman then sends it to us. And they have to have a legal grounds to discharge you. So they have to have a basis under the law. And they have to do appropriate discharge planning. And that's usually where it all falls apart. Because often the facility's answer to discharge is, well, we're going to send you back to whoever you were living with, whatever relative you were living with before.
Right.
But that relative is saying, I can't provide their care. I don't have the skills. I don't have the ability. The house isn't handicap accessible. They can't come back here. But that's their plan. I've seen plans they're going to discharge them to homeless shelters.
Mm.
And, so that's one of the arguments we usually make is that this discharge plan is not appropriate. You have to find an appropriate placement. You can't just put them out on the street.
Right, which is sad. I mean, that's a sad story. But the reason for the discharge, what have been some of the reasons that you've heard?
Well, most common is non-payment. That's going to be the most common reason. But there's all kinds of reasons. Sometimes they decide that the resident's just too much trouble. They're too difficult,
That's
and
sad.
they're tired of dealing with them. We just had one recently where they didn't like a resident's online presence, so they wanted to discharge. And But it's usually either the resident is causing them trouble.
Right.
Sometimes facilities don't do their homework that they're supposed to do initially, and they don't find out that they don't actually have what they need to provide care for this resident. But once they accept the resident, they have to come up with what the resident needs. That's on them, because they're supposed to do an assessment before they ever accept the resident.
Right, and when you're talking about this, we're talking about, I know nursing homes, which are covered by one set of laws, but like assisted living or some of these personal care homes, does the resident and I might be getting into the weeds here, but don't residents have certain rights that an appellate right or whatever it is internally to challenge this, or do they just have to accept it and then go to court and then fight it out?
They have the right to appeal the notice, and they have a right to a hearing, and it's an administrative hearing
Oh, okay,
in Georgia.
okay,
And so it's a hearing before the OSA, the Office of State Administrative Hearings, and that's often those are held at the facility because the resident can't go
Sure.
to the location. But that's where we get involved, is at the hearing level.
okay. So again, this is all new to me. It's very interesting. So I'm just going to pick a date. You get a notice on February the 1st that we're discharging you. Is there a time frame? I mean, does that person have to get out in 15 days, 30 days, or there's an appeal right? So even though they say leave on February 1st, that you're not just taking a senior that's just laying in bed and just throwing them out. That there's a time frame. Is that right? I'm just
Yes.
asking that. Okay.
For most discharges, it's a 30-day notice. So if they send the notice on February 1st, they're telling you you have to leave on March 3rd, assuming it's a 28-day
Right.
in February. So it's a 30-day notice, and then you have the right to file an appeal to that, and then a hearing will be scheduled, which is going to generally delay it further,
Right.
because you're not going to get a hearing scheduled within that 30 days. There are some exceptions where they can do an immediate discharge, but it's still not really immediate. You still have the right to request a hearing.
Well, I think. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. No, this is very interesting. If you could, I'm sorry. Continue.
That's okay. That's only if they're alleging that the resident is a danger to themselves or others, that they need a more immediate action.
Well, what's very interesting to me is that there is time for, if a senior is capable, or their guardian or their loved one or their relative has time to contact certainly your office or an attorney or the ombudsman so these rules and their rights are explained to them. Isn't that fair? I mean, nothing happens. They get a discharge notice. They're not out on the street the next day.
No. And the appeal rights are in the notice they get, the notice of discharge. It tells them how to request a hearing. And for nursing homes, the good part is that the ombudsman also gets that notice. So there's another third party who's advocating for the resident who will also follow up on that.
Well, I think that's great. I just, because I know some seniors, depending on their condition, that they'll panic. Oh, I'm just being thrown out tomorrow. Well, you might be being thrown out or asked to leave, but there is time to consult a professional, be it an ombudsman, be it you, be it their own attorney or somebody, so that this is not such a traumatic experience for the senior. Because I can imagine being in a nursing home, and as you say, most people don't want to be there anyway, and say, okay, you're discharged, and to where? To who? I mean, it's a big shock to the senior. So I certainly applaud what you all do, and that's what the time frame is, right? That's why it's a time for an appellate issue, that there is days and maybe even months before somebody's actually got to leave normally.
Yes, it's usually going to be at least 6 weeks.
Oh, okay.
If an appeal is filed. But, an interesting situation is when you have a senior who says, great, I'm thrilled they're discharging me, I want to leave. But they have no plan.
Right, and what do you do with them? But,
But they don't want to challenge the discharge because
right.
They want to be discharged.
No, I understand, and there's so many different twists and turns on this. But that was a good discussion here, and we're going to have to take our break from the third segment, and then we will be back with Cynthia Gibson, with Georgia Legal Services here, right after our break.
The Docs for Patient Care Foundation is your way to join the fight and become a member of an organization created by doctors for patients, dedicated to fighting for your healthcare freedom and preserving the doctor-patient relationship. Get a pen and paper. Write down docs4patientcarefoundation.org. That's DOCS, the number 4, patientcarefoundation.org. Go to our site and please make a generous tax-deductible donation and join the fight today. Thank you.
This is Dr. Susan Blank, host of Detailing Addiction on America's Web Radio. Please join us at 4 p.m. on Tuesday afternoons.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Well, welcome back to the final segment of the Safe Senior Hour with Joe Gavalis. And again, remember our motto, elder abuse. Our statement, elder abuse doesn't report itself, and we're honored to have as our guest today Cynthia Gibson, a attorney with the Georgia Legal Services Office. And Cynthia, we were just talking about people being discharged from like nursing homes, and I was just curious about people who come in or talk to you. Can you kind of qualify who basically is? Is it relatives? Is it the actual senior or a concerned citizen? Who contacts you to initiate help?
It's often the senior themselves. If we're not talking about someone that's in long-term care, it's usually the senior. For long-term care, it could be the senior, or it could be a relative, or the ombudsman, because sometimes the seniors can't speak for themselves. So it's often someone else. And
again, this all starts with a telephone call, or can.
Yes.
And then it gets put to the right person to discuss it. Do you? Just for Georgia, but this is I would think every state would have the same thing. Do you have a statewide like website, or is there an 800 number or anything that you would suggest people to call or look it up in their own area?
Well, like I said, for outside of Georgia, I would suggest just Googling legal services to get your local providers. But for Georgia, we have a website which is www.glsp.org. You can actually apply for services on that website, or you can call 833-457-7529, and that's statewide.
And they'll direct you in Georgia, and that's probably every state has something like that, wouldn't you think?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the services, I mean, especially, and I want to just remind our seniors out there that this is a free service. The question is, where do you get your funding from? Is this a state-funded, federally funded, or just donations, or all the above?
It's all the above. We have both federal grants, state grants, and private donations.
So for the senior out there that has some issues that they're looking at, that or their relatives, that they're just perplexed what to do, this is a great source of information. It is something that you should take advantage of. and especially a lot of things and a lot of specifics that the citizens don't really know all the details. This is new to everybody, especially when you have a loved one that's about to have some issues that maybe you haven't ever had to deal with. You might have heard about them, but now you have to get down to looking at documents, creating a document like the power of attorney, or signing up. One of the concerns I've heard, and maybe you can clarify it, is that this idea where the government and will take your assets before they put you in a nursing home. Are you aware of some claims like that? I don't even know if that's true, but if it isn't, it's a myth out there. Where they check your assets and then they'll possibly try to have you sell them or what. Are you familiar with anything like that?
Yes, what you're talking about is Medicaid estate recovery, and every state has this now. But they're not going to take anything, especially while you're living. But what happens is if you end up needing long-term care, it's very expensive. So if you go into a nursing home, eventually you're not going to be able to pay for it. And so you're going to need to apply for Medicaid for the state to pay for your care. And if that happens, and you own a home, you can't sell that home.
Right.
And when the person passes away who was receiving Medicaid, their heirs are going to get a letter from the state saying the state of Georgia paid $170,000 for this person's care, and so we are asking to be repaid out of the estate. And let's say that person owned a house that was worth $300,000. The state's not going to take the house, but they have a claim, just like any other creditor. And so the heirs can pay the state the amount that the person received in benefits, the $170,000, which would have been more like $300,000 private pay at least, because that's a reduced Medicaid rate.
Right. So
they can sell the house and pay it, and then they can split what's left, and that's how it works.
Right. Well, we appreciate that. That's so it just says you need to contact some people. It's and work on that. But with that, our time is up today for our final segment. I want to thank you, Cynthia Gibson, for coming on. It's been very enlightening. I hope we have you on again. And remember, people out there, elder abuse doesn't report itself.
The disease of addiction is a life-altering challenge, not just for the person suffering its effects, but also